So this is going back about 20 years or so. I was coming home from giving a lecture. Hadn't gone very well. I thought it was good, but it just hadn't landed. Sometimes these things don't work out. It was mid-morning. It had been icy, frosty. Road was still cold, but no obvious ice about. On the way home, was driving through the countryside, and there's this one corner which is particularly sharp. It's steep on a hill, but I was coming back up the curve rather than going down, so there's no reason why it should have run on or anything like that. And I steered into the curve, and suddenly I found the back of the car had moved out. I hit the curb, vaulted over the curb, and then for what was, I don't know, maybe half a second, but it seemed like a much longer time, I was flying through the air. And then bang, landed, and I landed in a hedge, substantial hedge, enough to break the car without doing it too awfully much damage or doing me too awfully much damage. So the airbag inflated. Nothing too bad happened to me. I actually burnt my hand on the airbag, but that was it. And okay, got out, looked at the car. It's a write-off, but I was fine. Why? Why did it happen? And of course the thing was, in that half a second, maybe it was 2 seconds, I was effectively flying through the air. The weirdest thing happened because, the biggest cliche in the world is that, oh, your life flashes before you as you face death. But actually it was just one of those, oh, I'm flying through the air now. Oh, is this where it all ends? Let's wait and see. Bang! And it felt as slow as that. It obviously wasn't. It was boom, boom, boom. But it felt as slow as that. So my question really this evening is, where was my intention in that? And where was my attention in that? Was I paying attention? Well, I thought I was. I clearly intended to follow the road. I clearly intended to get home in one piece. And yet I nearly didn't. Was I paying attention? Well, I said the lecture, hadn't landed like I was hoping it would. And in actual fact, that was part of a whole series of talks for a new group at a new college. Same thing which had worked brilliantly elsewhere. And I was doing my thing and it wasn't landing. And that was quite personally challenging because, as a teacher, it's important. It matters. Does this land? It's not going through the motions. So that was difficult. And then we'd recently moved into a new house. It was the only house that we could afford in the town that would do the job, but it needed quite a bit of work doing to it. So we started changing things around the way you do, finding builders, getting this, the builder subcontracted with that. We'd had some rather more expensive than we'd ideally liked oak windows made for downstairs, and that was great. And apparently while I was out teaching, they just arrived and they were the wrong size, they didn't fit, and what we're going to do about that. And of course the investment, financial, spiritual, emotional, in this house, trying to make this house, which was going to be the workshop and our family home and everything else right, that's tremendous. And when you're a visual artist anyway, God knows how many years of training, God knows how many years of practice. How these things look matter, and at that time in my life they mattered a lot. So getting this right, this mattered, and this was a problem, and this was a real problem. And so from both ends, the past, very recent past, just having given this talk, the future, what was I going to have to do to sort this out? How is this going to be remedied? Who are we going to get angry with? From that evolved my present. Bang. Which could have been my end. Didn't hurt me. Didn't hurt anybody else, thank heavens. But if I wipe myself out, that's our business gone. My wife looking after two still very young children at that point on her own, without any resources whatsoever, because, we're going to prayer as you are at that age so often. See, intention's important, and we talk about it. We talk about it in Buddhism quite a lot, but I'm not always sure we're very clear. If you go again back to the traditional teachings, in some senses, karma is defined as intention. So how the world turns out, how life turns out, is, in that sense, intention. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean our intention, that towards which we orient ourselves, that towards which we turn, actively shapes our life in each moment. Our intention is shaped by that life also. And so perhaps a good word to think about intention is actually aim. It's got a target, it's going somewhere, and it's moving towards that target. And it's literally our movement towards. And in terms of this basic image, this basic embodied image that keep going back to, movement towards, movement away from, aim works quite well. This is movement towards, and that which we move towards shapes us. Can we say attention follows intention? Or should we say intention follows attention? If we accept that I'm actually, in one sense, fabricating, making the world, or actually in that same movement, I'm making the world and the world's making me, because I recognize you out there and I turn towards you. I know it's you. You've attracted my attention. Unless I know there's a you to recognize, I'm not going to see you. Unless I know what a person is, I'm not going to see you. So attention and intention are in this kind of spiral, and we have the term sankhara, samskara, these patterns which we form, which form us, which in one sense we're made of. We have a pattern, a habit, a way of seeing, a way of doing. And then because that's our habit, our pattern, our way of seeing, our way of doing, that's the way we see things. That's the way we do things. And they reinforce. They evolve as well, because it's always a fluid, dynamic process. We learn. We form new patterns. We abandon old ones. In some sense, that's what this practice is. It's about interrogating these patterns, seeing where they serve life, seeing where they don't serve life, and then maybe having the intention, the aspiration to change them, how they function. I think a lot of the time we use intention, I won't say loosely, that's probably not the right word, but I intend to do that. oh, I had every intention of doing that. I was going to do that. Or I had no intention of doing that. I didn't mean to do that. Well, we're talking about a gap between what we think of as us and our intention and the world, how things actually turn out in the world. And obviously we think about that in a very, I'm going to say, legalistic way. You know, we're constantly excusing ourselves for having done something or not having done something. So let's go back to my car for a second. What was my conscious intention there? Well, just to get home as fast as possible, but safely. Well, clearly that's not what I was doing. And we actually know, obviously, since Freud especially, but you go back, you can find this in the teachings. Intention is complex. It's multi-layered. If we want to think for a moment about, say, the difference of intention that we can pick up from the words somebody says, their tone of voice while they're saying them, their body language. These things can clearly tell us about very different intentions. So at one level, I'm conscious at a certain level of what I think my intention is, what I'll call my intention, and that's fair. But is it actually what I'm turning towards? Is it actually the direction I'm moving in? Is that actually my aim? Let's talk about the other side of that. Let's talk about the negative. Because actually I think that the negative's interesting here. Because if we're going to flag up the link between in-tention and a-tention, that I pay attention to what I'm aiming towards, maybe I'm inattentive to what I'm not aiming towards. Maybe I'm ignoring that. And again, I've been using that as an active verb. I ignore it. I turn away from it. Thinking about the fifth precept for a moment, which is about heedlessness. You know, it's basic formulation. Don't drink, don't take drugs, don't do anything which clouds the mind, which leads you into heedlessness. Because, well, you're not paying attention. When you're heedless, you stop paying attention. That's the whole point of it. And clearly, in a sense, when I was driving home that day, I was heedless. I was inattentive of where my mind should have been, which was paying attention to the road, to the conditions, to the response of the car. Now this actually takes us in the direction of the real meaning of mindfulness. It's fairly easy to get this idea of just paying attention to the present moment. And in one sense, that's an easy reading we can do of what was happening, or rather what wasn't happening while I was driving that morning. I wasn't in the present moment. I was somewhat in the past and somewhat in the future. And had I been more in the present moment, well, yeah, I probably would have been paying more attention. But there's a sense in which actual mindfulness, keeping in mind, and let's keep that meaning of it in mind, returning to mind, keeping our mind on. It's bigger than that narrow definition of the present moment. Let's think again about me not having my accident, but just driving down the road. If I'm aware, if I'm mindful, then I'm obviously going to be aware of my place as a road user amongst other road users. I'm going to be aware of other motorists, cyclists, the pedestrians. If I'm being really mindful, I'll notice that that car parked up ahead has somebody in it. They might want to get out. They might open their door. I need to leave them more room. Clearly, child on a bicycle, okay. Need to be very careful here. There's so much give and take. And that's because being mindful involves understanding the context and the possible consequences. If I'm not aware of the bigger picture, if I'm not aware of the context, what it is to be a road user, what it is to be a cyclist, what it is to be a pedestrian, who might be about, how they might be looking, what that might tell me. And again, none of this really even conscious. We're not talking about overthinking here at all. We're just talking about being aware, paying attention, being mindful. And again, if we're really just trying to nail this down to the present moment the whole time, well, if I've got some savings, where are they invested? Maybe I give it to the bank to look after. Well, what are they doing with it? We know that fossil fuel companies are ripping up the planet. Are they, you can make a lot of money out of Shell or Exxon or whoever. Are they investing like that or not? It's not really present moment, but I think we'd have to say it is mindful. In fact, if we want to think about the state of the world, it's necessary to think about those things. I know I keep coming over and over and over again back to the precepts, but if our practice at one level is about learning to walk together, then this larger context of mindfulness, this understanding the bigger picture, the real context within which I'm responding in this present moment to whatever's going on, is significant. It's important. People in the West often query why the precepts are framed negatively. I undertake not to do this. I undertake not to do that. And it's true that in the West we often come up with positive formulations. I will affirm that I'm going to do this. If we talk about, on one sense, non-violence, then we'll talk about affirming life. But I think in this context, it's actually interesting to understand the power of the negative framing. That in actual fact, what I'm doing when I'm driving down the road is not so much affirming life as not wanting to hurt anybody, not wanting to kill anybody. It's a negative intention. It's a negative intention towards not harming. Ahimsa. This great principle that underlies so much of Buddhism. And in actual fact, while where I can do good is fantastic, not harming or trying to minimize the harming that I do, because, part of taking this practice seriously is freely recognizing the harming that we all do at every level, just by breathing in and out, consuming food, living. It doesn't come for free, and it doesn't come for free to other beings. But we always have the choice. We are the choice. Are we going to live a life that aspires towards non-harming? Or are we just going to, what's that to do with me? Separate or not separate? And again, so much of what we're talking here is just realizing this principle of not separate. Am I separate from other road users? Is it important that I get there first? That I get there ahead of you? Or are we not separate? Are we just trying to get where we're going safely? Don't normally talk about the other Zen precepts. We have these three pure precepts, which are kind of overarching, contain the other. Someday or other, I actually do a talk on those. To some extent, they've always baffled me a little bit, because two of them are basically do good, don't do evil. But I think this pattern of attention gives me, at least, a way of understanding that, because doing good, caring, compassion, fantastic. I turn towards that. I bend my attention towards that. And yet in practice, driving down the road, managing my day-to-day life, a lot of this is about, well, not so much don't do evil, but pay attention. Be mindful. Don't harm. That's almost the imperative. And if I am more mindful, if I offer that my attention, if I form the intention to be more non-harming, then I affirm my non-separation from all beings. And hopefully I get to where I'm going to. We walk together.